Hello, this is Melanie Beechwood with Team 11 doing the adversarial visualization quiz for the Misleading lab. What this is a fully deployed in GCP application with a front end, a back end, and a sandbox mode that code gets executed within. That's meant to help teach and bridge the education gap between what is a misleading chart, how can LLMs do it, and this can also lead as an interesting base towards further understanding how LLMs can work. In my slide deck, I have all the references of different areas that kind of led me up to this point, because there's a lot of really cool research papers and many, many more than what I listed there. This is not an authentication, just a user login to keep track of your scores. You get to this and you have the ability to choose a data set. There's pre-loaded ones. There's also the ability to upload your own. That's what this is. For each one of these, it's going to have a description, a path, the rows, the column names, and any information that it has. And then there's the ability to type in your own questions, which could be anything here. The examples were generated using an LLM when you upload your data, and they will stay the same though. It's looking at the information and trying to see what could be the best types of questions that might give interesting misleading results. All right, for this one, I'm gonna go with one here. I don't believe I've looked at this, so I'm just gonna use one of the example questions just to kind of pull down and do, and I'm gonna hit generate. All right, while this is going, this is probably the longest section. It's going to send it to the back end and the back end as a post, and then the front end will pull the back end for regular updates as it goes. So it's going to start the pipeline. It's going to validate that that question makes sense for this data set. If it doesn't, it'll give us a suggested question instead that might make more sense given this data set. It'll also, which is exactly what it did there. So let's try another question. Clearly, I didn't look at all of these before I went. Let's look at sleep on academic performance. Let's try that again. All right, so what we were saying is, so that showed you that it goes into the validator. If it passes the validator, it'll go to an exploration, which will look at some of the information around the data set that it's been given, and then we'll be able to send the code, generate code, and send it to the sandbox to do a deeper exploration given that question. From there, it sends it to an honest chart, which generator that looks at all of that information and designs code that also gets run in the sandbox that creates the first honest chart. There it ends to the misleading strategy that looks at all the techniques available. Right now there's 10 techniques that it knows about, things like truncating the access, cherry picking data, inappropriate chart type, inappropriate aggregation, changing the misleading the title, misleading colors to kind of do it on emotion, removing grid lines, keeping minimal data points, and a few more. These are all in like a dictionary where each one has the title, what it is, and the citation about it, and you'll see it come back in the summary when it's pulling from the same spot. This means that it's easy to change this to be able to use a RAG or to increase the use of this as you go. So when it does the misleading strategy, it kind of picks all of that information, but it also figures out the target of what is the story we're wanting to tell to mislead to. Then the misleading chart generator takes all of this information in, creates a misleading chart, the adversarial chart, which is what it's doing right now. Again, that's in Sandbox. And then it generates this quiz. You're going to get one or the other. It's randomized. So this one impacts sleep on academic performance. We see that it gives the sample sizes, the error range, the access isn't truncated. We do have on the two edges, it looks like they aggregated some of the data, which is a little interesting, but might make sense overall. I think this is going to be the honest one. So you submit the answer. Weirdly, this takes the most time. So what this does pretty well is it does a shockingly good job at doing the honest chart generation, even though that does not actually have, it's a 0-shot exam. And we could do this in a few shots. There's a lot of ways we could optimize that to get better performance. The strategy agent does a pretty good job overall, but it does link towards the easier methods such as changing the title, changing the colors, and truncating the access, and cherry picking data. Those are the ones that came up way more often in my evaluation than others, and I think it needs more prompting and examples to showcase when and how to use the other more complicated ones. So that's just something to keep in mind. It also, they can do a lot of different plot charts. It can do histogram bar charts, scatter plots, pie charts, heat maps. I haven't seen it do a spatial yet, but the data I tried for was more numerical categorical, less spatial. All right, now here when we see it side by side, we see it gives us a story now instead of just direct. More sleep directly drives higher academic achievement. It shows the exam scores here. It looks like a truncated access. So this is a pretty small amount, which is kind of what we saw over there. And then it did color code it, but it's trying to make the point that yes, this is much better over here, even though the fact that we saw that it's within its error bars for all of them. So we're not, this one makes it appear statistically significant, whereas we know that it is not. The summary will then show you what changed, the visual impact, so the message impact. It'll let you know how you did. It still gives you the techniques that were chosen and used by the chart generator and a little more information about them. Each one will give you how it's applied, why it's misleading, the citation, and the effectiveness. And then it lets you know about your performance, any learning points you have, and any key takeaways. You can then hit here to try another quiz, or you could look at the analytics dashboard, which gives you some information about the leaderboards, your statistics over time, and so forth. It does give you all of the different techniques, although this could be a lot neater and give you some examples of what those are, but I ran out of time for that. Where this does tend to really fall apart is just the misleading is typically either too subtle or doesn't really make sense, and you would be able to spot it sometimes. Other times, though, there's been ones that have absolutely tricked me, which is really interesting. All right, I am over time now, so I'm going to go on back. I think this was an interesting learning experience. Doing the sandbox was really interesting. Getting this up and running and deployed was really interesting. And I think there's a lot of really cool techniques that could be brought in, including doing a RAG or things like that. I think there's a lot of interesting progress that could be done here. Thanks.